Sophia didn't become invisible in a single moment, it happened slowly, almost gently, like a fading light no one noticed was dimming. At first, she thought it was just circumstance, just timing, just the way conversations flowed. But over time, patterns began to form, and patterns don't lie. She would begin to speak, and someone else would cut in. She would offer an idea, and it would be ignored, only to be praised moments later when repeated by someone else. She would stand in a room full of people and feel like she was observing life instead of living it. What hurt the most wasn't the silence of others, it was the silence she had accepted within herself. She had trained herself to step back. To let things go. To not make a scene. She told herself she was being mature, that she was choosing peace over conflict. But deep down, she knew the truth she tried to avoid: she wasn't choosing peace, she was avoiding discomfort. Avoiding rejection. Avoiding the risk of not being accepted. And in doing so, she had unknowingly rejected herself first. There were nights when she would lie awake, replaying conversations in her mind, not the ones where she spoke, but the ones where she didn't. The moments where she had something meaningful to say but swallowed it. The times where she agreed just to keep things smooth, even when every part of her disagreed. Those moments stayed with her, heavier than any argument ever could. Regret has a quiet way of building weight, and Sophia was carrying more of it than she realized. One particular day changed everything, not because something extraordinary happened, but because something painfully ordinary repeated itself one too many times. She was part of a discussion where decisions were being made, and as usual, she had ideas, clear, thoughtful, valuable ideas. She gathered the courage to speak, but before she could finish, someone dismissed her with a casual, almost effortless interruption. The conversation moved on. No one circled back. No one asked her to continue. And for a moment, she froze. Not because she was shocked, but because she wasn't. That was the moment that unsettled her the most. Not the disrespect itself, but how familiar it felt. How expected it had become. How normal it was for her to be overlooked. She left that space with a calm face, but inside, something cracked, not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in a quiet, irreversible way. It was the kind of realization that doesn't scream, it settles. It sits with you. It refuses to leave. If you keep allowing this, it will never change. That thought followed her home. It echoed in her mind as she sat alone, staring at nothing, yet seeing everything clearly for the first time. She had spent so long hoping people would recognize her worth, but she had never truly shown it, not fully, not consistently, not with conviction, because showing your worth requires risk. It requires the willingness to be seen, and possibly rejected. And Sophia had been avoiding that risk her entire life. But something was different now. The discomfort of staying the same had become heavier than the fear of change. And when that shift happens, even slightly, everything begins to move. She didn't wake up the next day as a new person. There was no sudden surge of confidence, no fearless energy running through her veins. What she had instead was something quieter, but far more powerful: a decision. A decision to stop abandoning herself. It started in the smallest ways, almost invisible to anyone else. The next time she was in a conversation, she didn't rush to speak, but when she did, she didn't apologize beforehand. That alone felt unnatural, like she was breaking an unspoken rule she had followed her entire life. Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart raced. She expected interruption. She expected dismissal. But something surprising happened. Even when someone tried to cut in, she didn't stop. Not aggressively. Not loudly. But firmly. She finished her sentence. That moment lasted only a few seconds, but for Sophia, it felt like reclaiming something she had lost years ago. It wasn't about what she said, it was about the fact that she allowed herself to say it completely. Respect, she realized, begins in moments like that. Not in grand gestures. Not in dramatic declarations. But in quiet decisions to not shrink. From there, she began to build, slowly, intentionally. She started paying attention to her habits, especially the unconscious ones. The way she stood, slightly closed off. The way her eyes dropped when speaking. The way she softened her words to avoid sounding too strong. Each of these habits had been shaped by years of trying to fit in, to not stand out too much, to be acceptable. But acceptable was never the same as respected. So she began adjusting, not to become someone else, but to return to who she could have been if fear hadn't shaped her so much. She stood a little straighter. Held eye contact a little longer. Spoke a little clearer. These were small changes, but they required immense internal effort. Because every change challenged an old belief. What if they don't like this version of me? That thought came often. But this time, she didn't run from it. She answered it. Then they don't. For the first time, Sophia began to understand that respect isn't about being liked by everyone. In fact, trying to be liked by everyone often leads to being respected by no one. True respect requires boundaries. It requires clarity. It requires the courage to be misunderstood by some in order to be valued by the right ones. And that courage doesn't come instantly, it's built through repetition. Day by day, she kept showing up differently. Some days were easier than others. Some days she felt strong, grounded, almost unshakable. Other days, the old version of her tried to return, the quiet, hesitant, uncertain version that preferred safety over growth. But the difference now was awareness. She could see it happening. And once you see something clearly, you can't fully go back to being blind to it. There were moments where people resisted her change. Not openly, not always intentionally, but subtly. They were used to the old Sophia. The one who agreed easily, the one who didn't challenge anything. The one who stayed in the background. Growth disrupts expectations. And not everyone is comfortable when you stop being who they expect you to be. But Sophia didn't argue. She didn't try to explain her transformation. She didn't seek approval for it. She simply continued. Quietly. Consistently. Without announcement. Because she had learned something that changed everything, respect is not negotiated, it is demonstrated. Weeks passed, and the internal shift became undeniable. She no longer felt the same need to prove herself constantly. She didn't over-explain. She didn't over-apologize. She didn't chase conversations or force connections. Instead, she became selective. With her words. With her time. With her energy. And that selectiveness created something powerful, presence. When Sophia spoke now, it carried weight. Not because she was louder, but because she was intentional. Because she spoke when it mattered. Because her words came from certainty, not from the need to be heard at any cost. People noticed. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But gradually. And the irony was, the less she tried to be noticed, the more she was. But the most important change wasn't external. It was internal. For the first time, Sophia felt aligned with herself. There was no constant conflict between what she thought and what she said. No gap between who she was and how she presented herself. That alignment created a quiet confidence, one that didn't need validation to exist. She began to respect herself. And once that foundation was built, everything else started to follow. Because the truth she had finally understood was simple, but life-changing: no one will respect you more than you respect yourself. And once you truly understand that, you stop asking for permission to exist fully. You stop waiting to be chosen. You choose yourself. Growth is quiet in the beginning, almost invisible, like roots forming beneath the surface where no one can see them. But eventually, growth demands to be tested, and when it is, it rarely feels like progress. It feels like pressure. Like resistance. Like everything around you is pushing back, asking one question over and over again: are you really changing, or is this just temporary? Sophia didn't notice when the tests began. There was no warning, no clear shift in the air, no moment that signaled, now it gets harder. It simply happened the way life always does, through people, through situations, through moments that seem ordinary on the outside but carry weight on the inside. At first, it was subtle. A conversation where someone dismissed her opinion again, but this time, instead of shrinking, she felt something rise within her. Not anger exactly, but clarity. A sharp awareness that this was the exact kind of moment that used to define her, and if she wasn't careful, it still could. Her instinct tried to pull her back into old patterns: stay quiet, let it go, don't create tension. That voice was still there, still familiar, still convincing. But there was another voice now. Stronger. Calmer. Certain. No. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue aggressively. She simply repeated her point, clearly, firmly, without apology. And for a brief moment, the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable. The interruption stopped. The conversation paused. And for the first time in a situation that used to silence her, she held her ground. But growth is not proven in one moment, it's proven in consistency. And consistency is where most people break. Days later, the real test came, not in a controlled setting, but in a situation where emotions ran higher, where pressure was stronger, where the stakes felt personal. Someone challenged her directly, not just her ideas, but her capability, her judgment, her place in the conversation. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut. Old Sophia would have retreated instantly. She would have questioned herself, replayed the words, and eventually convinced herself that maybe they were right. But this time, something different happened. She paused. Not out of fear, but out of control. She allowed the moment to exist without rushing to react. She let the discomfort sit, let the tension build slightly, let the silence stretch just enough to remind herself that she was not the same person anymore. And then she responded, not emotionally, not defensively, but with precision. Her words were calm, but they carried weight. Not because she was trying to prove something, but because she knew what she was saying was valid. That certainty changed everything. It didn't guarantee agreement. It didn't ensure approval. But it demanded acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's what respect looks like at first, not agreement, but recognition. But not everyone welcomed this new version of Sophia. Some people adjusted. Some began to listen more, to include her naturally, to treat her presence with a level of attention that wasn't there before. But others resisted, not openly, not directly, but in ways that were harder to confront. Subtle dismissals. Passive comments. Small attempts to push her back into the version of herself they were comfortable with. Because when you change, you don't just disrupt your own patterns, you disrupt others' expectations. And not everyone is ready for that. There were moments where Sophia felt the pressure of that resistance. Moments where it would have been easier to go back, to be agreeable, to be quiet, to be the version of herself that caused no friction. That version was still accessible. Still familiar. Still safe. But it wasn't her anymore. And going back would have cost her something she had worked too hard to build. Self-respect. The challenge wasn't just external, it was internal. Because growth doesn't erase doubt, it teaches you how to face it. There were nights where Sophia still questioned herself. Still wondered if she was doing too much, if she was becoming too distant, too firm, too different. What if this isn't who I'm supposed to be? That question lingered longer than she expected. Not because she believed it fully, but because change always carries uncertainty. You leave behind a version of yourself that was familiar, even if it was limiting, and step into something unknown. And the unknown is uncomfortable. But Sophia had learned something important: discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. Often, it's a sign you're doing something necessary. So instead of retreating, she leaned in. She began setting clearer boundaries, not just in conversations, but in how she allowed people to treat her time, her energy, her presence. She stopped overcommitting. Stopped saying yes when she meant no. stopped explaining her decisions in detail just to make others comfortable. And that shift was not easy. Because boundaries reveal truth. They show you who respects you, and who only preferred you when you were easy to control, easy to access, easy to overlook. Some connections grew stronger. Others became distant. A few faded entirely. And for the first time, Sophia didn't chase them. That was one of her biggest transformations, not the way she spoke, not the way she carried herself, but the way she let go. She stopped holding on to people, situations, and environments that required her to shrink. She stopped negotiating her worth just to maintain comfort. Because she had realized something that changed everything: not all loss is failure. Some loss is alignment. And alignment feels like peace, even when it looks like change. But the real test, the one that would define whether her growth was temporary or permanent, came unexpectedly. It was a situation where the pressure wasn't just social, it was personal. A moment where speaking up could create conflict, where standing firm could lead to rejection, where choosing herself could mean standing alone. And for a brief moment, the old fear returned stronger than it had in weeks. Her heart raced. Her thoughts tangled. Her instincts pulled her in two directions: stay safe or stand strong. This was the moment. Not the small conversations. Not the subtle shifts. This was where growth either held, or broke. Sophia took a breath, deeper than usual, grounding herself in everything she had built over the past weeks. Every small decision, every moment she chose not to shrink. Every time she spoke when it would have been easier to stay silent. All of it led here. And then she chose. Not comfort. Not approval. Herself. She spoke with clarity, with honesty, with a calm strength that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. She didn't try to control the outcome. She didn't try to make everyone agree. She simply stood in her truth, and let the moment unfold. The reaction wasn't perfect. There was tension. Disagreement. Distance. But there was also something else. Respect. Not loud. Not obvious. But real, because respect is often quiet at first. It doesn't always come with praise or acknowledgement. Sometimes, it shows up in the way people pause before dismissing you. In the way they think twice before interrupting. In the way your presence starts to carry weight, even in silence. Sophia felt it. Not just from others, but from herself. And that was the difference. Because external respect can be inconsistent. It can change, fade, or be influenced by others' perceptions. But self-respect, once built, once earned, once truly understood, becomes unshakable. Sophia was no longer trying to prove she deserved space. She was taking it, naturally, calmly, without force. She was no longer asking to be heard. She was speaking, and letting her words stand on their own. She was no longer waiting to be respected. She had become someone who respected herself enough that others had no choice but to recognize it. But her journey wasn't over. Because the final stage of growth isn't just about becoming strong, it's about becoming consistent in that strength, regardless of the environment, the people, or the pressure. And that's where Sophia was headed next. Sophia thought reaching self-respect would feel like arriving somewhere, like standing at the top of a mountain after a long and exhausting climb. But what she discovered instead was something far more profound. There was no final destination, no permanent state of having it all together. What she had gained wasn't an ending. It was a way of living. A way of thinking. A way of standing in a world that no longer depended on circumstances staying easy. Because life didn't slow down for her transformation. Challenges didn't disappear. People didn't suddenly become perfect. Situations didn't always align with her expectations. But none of that shook her the way it once would have. Because she had stopped building her confidence on outcomes, and started building it on identity. And identity is far more stable than results. There were days where things didn't go her way. Conversations where she wasn't understood. Moments where her efforts weren't recognized. Situations where outcomes felt unfair. The difference now wasn't the absence of difficulty, it was her response to it. She no longer internalized everything. That was one of her quiet breakthroughs. Before, every negative reaction, every disagreement, every overlooked moment felt personal, like a reflection of her worth. But now, she could separate herself from the situation. She could see clearly that not every response from others was about her. Sometimes it was about their limitations, their perspectives, their own struggles. And that understanding gave her peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything going right, but the kind that comes from not needing everything to go right. Sophia had become emotionally disciplined. She didn't react instantly anymore. She responded intentionally. She gave herself space between what happened and how she chose to handle it. And in that space, she found control. Real control. Not over people, not over outcomes, but over herself. And that is the highest form of power. There were moments where people tried to challenge her, not aggressively, but subtly, testing whether her calmness was weakness, whether her silence in certain situations meant hesitation, whether her composure could be shaken. But what they didn't understand was that Sophia's silence was no longer fear, it was choice. She spoke when it mattered. And when she did, her words carried clarity, direction, and purpose. She didn't waste energy proving herself to people who had already decided not to see her. That was another level she had reached, understanding that not every mind can be changed, and not every perception needs to be corrected. Some things are better left alone. Some people are better left behind. And some battles are better left unfought. That understanding didn't make her cold, it made her focused. Because energy, once scattered, had now become directed. She invested in what mattered. She gave her time to what aligned. She showed up fully in spaces where she could grow, contribute, and expand. And in doing so, she created an environment around herself that reflected her internal state, clear, intentional, and grounded. But even as she grew stronger, she never became rigid. That was another part of her evolution, balance. She didn't confuse self-respect with arrogance. She didn't let confidence turn into ego. She remained open to learning, open to feedback, open to growth. But the difference was, she filtered everything through her own understanding first. She didn't accept opinions blindly. She evaluated them. And that made her both strong and adaptable. There was a moment, much later, when she found herself around people who were loud, dominant, and used to controlling every conversation. The kind of environment that once made her disappear completely. But now, she stood there, not competing, not shrinking, simply existing fully as herself. She didn't rush to speak. She didn't fight for attention. She didn't adjust her personality to match theirs. She remained steady. And when the moment came, she spoke, not over others, not against them, but with a calm presence that didn't need volume to be felt. And again, just like before, the energy shifted. Because presence is not about how much noise you make. It's about how much certainty you carry. And Sophia carried certainty in a way that could not be ignored. But perhaps the most beautiful part of her journey wasn't how she handled others, it was how she treated herself when no one was watching. She had become kinder to herself. Not in a weak, indulgent way, but in a supportive, understanding way. She no longer punished herself for mistakes. She no longer replayed failures endlessly. She learned, adjusted, and moved forward. Because growth requires both discipline and compassion. Too much discipline without compassion leads to burnout. Too much compassion without discipline leads to stagnation. Sophia found the balance. And in that balance, she found peace. There were still moments of reflection, times where she would sit quietly and think about who she used to be. The girl who hesitated, who doubted, who waited. And instead of feeling regret, she felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Because that version of her had started the journey. That version had felt the discomfort, had noticed the patterns, had made the first difficult decision to change. Without her, none of this would exist. And that realization grounded her even more. She didn't see herself as above anyone. She saw herself as someone who chose growth, and continued choosing it every day. Because that's the truth most people don't talk about: self-respect is not built once. It is built daily. In every decision. In every response. In every moment where you choose alignment over approval. Sophia no longer needed reminders of her worth. She lived it. In the way she walked into rooms. In the way she spoke without hesitation. In the way she listened without insecurity. In the way she left situations that didn't respect her. And most importantly, in the way she never abandoned herself again. That was her greatest victory. Not the respect she gained from others, but the loyalty she built with herself. Because once you reach that level, where you trust yourself, respect yourself, and stand by yourself no matter what, you become something rare. Someone unshakable. Someone grounded. Someone powerful in a quiet, undeniable way. And people feel that. They may not always understand it. They may not always acknowledge it. But they feel it. Because real respect doesn't come from what you say. It comes from who you are. And Sophia had become someone who didn't need to ask for it, chase it, or demand it. She had become someone who naturally received it, because she had earned it where it mattered most. Within herself.